What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. We are at Mitchell Caverns. We're gonna take a small hiking tour, so I just wanted to give you a show around like the area that we're at. So if you like look around, this is deep in the desert. This is pretty much like on the way to Vegas. So you're gonna go ahead and like come up with me. So pretty much parking is down here, or you can park up here, which is where we parked. So it was a pretty steep hill coming up, but other than that, it was not too bad, I'd say. So pretty much what I'm just gonna show you is our tour is gonna start from right there, and we're pretty much just gonna do like I think like a 30-minute, an hour tour around the area. And we're not supposed to bring any Gatorade or anything like that. We can only bring water. It's gonna be a pretty steep hike, so wish us luck, guys. And we'll be right back, and I'll show you guys where we at later. We're going up to the cavern right now. So our tour is like probably gonna be like an hour, I think. But right now, once we hit the cave, I'll come back to you, okay?
Alright, so with everyone here, I want to welcome you guys to the Mitchell Caverns. I know it looks a lot bigger on the pictures on the website, but we have a great photographer. Obviously I'm not sending anybody into that. It's not a cavern, it's not natural, it's not very interesting in and of itself, and at this point I'm sure it's home to a rattlesnake trying to be left alone. But it is a great spot to talk about Jack's old mining claims, because that's what this is. This is one of Jack's old mines. You see, I mentioned that Jack gained all this land on mining claims. Well, during the Great Depression, a mining claim would have looked like a godsend, especially if you were crafty enough, because the idea is that you could lease a property directly from the federal government, and I mean huge swabs of land for dirt cheap, and do whatever you have to and want to on that property, with one very big caveat: you have to actually be mining. If you were not mining when a government inspector showed up, they would boot you off of this land, and as I mentioned before, Jack put a lot of hard work into this place, so he was not prepared to let that happen, which means when he's not doing a tour, he's coming out here with a hammer and chisel, drilling a hole in the rocks, drilling that hole until it's big enough to slide a piece of dynamite into. Once that dynamite goes off, he's got to get back in there and manually pull out anything that's been blasted apart by that dynamite until there's nothing left to pull out, and then, well, he's got to do it again and again to get deeper and deeper into the mountain here. On top of that, well, out here we're very well known for silver mining. In fact, a lot of the more professional looking mines you might have noticed along the mountainsides, they're all silver mines, old silver mines that were dried up before Jack's day. And what that means for Jack is that on paper, that's what he's looking for. But what that also means is that if Jack was to find silver in the mountainside, he would have to blast it out of here. He'd have to drag it out of here, drag it someplace where he can get it smelted down, a process that involves very high temperatures. And once he could get smelted down, Jack would have to extract the silver from the ore, which is a process that involves a lot of mercury and cyanide, which are some very dangerous chemicals, to say the least. On the other hand, Jack is a businessman. He knows that it's much easier to get silver out of silver dollars from people's pockets than it is getting it out of the side of the mountain like this. And of course, that's the plan. The cavern tour, the cavern resort, all of that money that he's making is actually going right back into the land. In particular, Jack is hoping to purchase the land. He's hoping to more or less take a mortgage on this land and pay off that mortgage so that he no longer has to mine like this, and he really wants to expedite that process. So while he does have to mine like this, let's be real with ourselves, he's not really looking for silver. Jack figures he might as well look for something that would expedite that process. So he starts looking for more caves out here. I know that sounds very childish at first, but hear me out. Because Jack, he's gone through the caves quite a few times. He's a smart man, he's a businessman, and once you go through the caves enough times, you start to be able to identify patterns. The kind of patterns that you would normally see inside a cavern. Especially, well, stuff like that over there behind you guys there. See that rock wall that's grayish, and then it shifts to that white mineral right there in front of you guys? That white mineral is a calcite mineral redeposited on that limestone by water. Spoiler warning. That is everything we're going to talk about once we get inside the cave. It is prettier inside the caves, I promise you, but Jack would see stuff like that all over the mountainside. Take a look at the mine again. You can see all that stuff along the rim of the mine. That's what he's looking for, because he's looking for something closed off by collapse, untouched by man, so that he can get the credit for that discovery. You see, Jack didn't really get the credit for discovering these caverns because he was merely shown the caverns. These caverns were very well known for a very long time, for a very, very, very good reason. A very good reason that, as of right now, I'm actually going to bury the lead on. The The most I'm going to give you guys, without any spoilers, is that you're going to see for yourselves why these caverns are so well known as we head around the mountainside here. What I do want to talk about, though, is, well, here's the thing. Jack is hoping to get something that he can put his name on. With that, he can get his name in the newspaper. With his name in the newspaper, he can get the word in this place spread nationwide, especially during that time. And with that word going nationwide, that would become free advertisement for his resort. And of course, the downside to all this is that Jack never does find any super secret caves, sadly. He does eventually make just enough money on the caverns we're going to right now to purchase the land, though. But that will become a little bit more important later on. So, without any spoilers, hopefully, are there any questions before we move on?
Did he get much silver out of there?
No, he didn't get any silver.
None.
He wasn't really looking for any silver. And most of the silver, yeah. And unfortunately, most of the silver veins out here were already dried up before Jack came out here. But great question, don't you worry. And with that, we're going to start heading around the mountainside. Once again, keep your eyes out. You're going to see why these caverns are so well known as we head around the mountainside. So with that, let's start making our way down. Some food. Come around here. Form an amphitheater around me.
Is a winding stair cavern north of the visitor center, or is it closer to here too?
No, it's a little further north.
What's this one called then?
The Mitchell Caverns.
This is
yeah. Let's see.
But he did not.
We got everyone. Let's not go too far ahead, folks. Let's come this way over here. I kind of want you guys around here. In fact, let's get you guys over here as well. Now, real quick, I'm sure you noticed it coming around the corner, but just in case you missed it by some chance, behold the eyes of the mountain, which are, of course, the caverns we're going to right now. And, well, I'm sure you can see why these caverns are so well known. That is a dramatic cave entrance. That is a cave entrance that really calls attention to itself. In fact, believe it or not, you can see that, the two eyes of the mountain, all the way down to the valley floor below. And most of you, especially those of you who already started taking your photos, probably spotted it coming around the corner. And as you spot it coming around the corner, you start coming down this way, you start taking your photos, you were awestruck, as you rightfully should be. But then a great big handful of you guys ended up walking right past the incredibly neat and interesting rock right here at your own feet. So, if I can get everyone over here, take a look at this. Take a look at this caramel-looking substance on this rock right over here. This right here is actually a formation known as dripstone. Right behind you two, take a look at the ripplings in the rocks here. This is actually a formation known as flowstone. If you look closely, there's a lot of this flowstone coming down from all the way up there. And what I really want to direct your attention towards are these rings right here. They almost look like the rings to a tree, but they are not. Not a single inch of this is petrified wood. So, with with that out of your guys' head, anybody want to take a guess where we usually find rock formations like these? Not quite. Caves. Gold stars, good sir. All cave formations. In fact, these here, the rings, they're actually broken chunks to stalactites. Now, with that out of the way, the question you probably have for me is that if these are cave formations, what are they doing out here? Well, as grandiose as the Mitchell Caverns are, they're actually all that's left was once a much larger cave network. It used to stretch all the way up this way before at some point in prehistory coming down on itself. And with this wash that we now have between us and the caverns now, most of this cave's been washed out to the valley floor below, leaving behind the bits we got here with us and the caverns themselves. Now, that does lead to a very interesting point, though. There's this wash between us and the caverns. Take a look at this real quick. That side of the wash, that mountainside versus this side of the wash, this mountainside that we are currently standing on. There is a very distinct difference between these two mountainsides, and it's got nothing to do with the rocks. Can anyone spot the difference? The trees. Yeah, whoever said that, gold stars to you. Because there are real trees over there, pine trees to be exact. And as well as a lot more Great Basin-esque vegetation. It looks almost more like a forest over there than it does over here. Over here, it's what you expect in the Mojave. Barrel cactus, creosote, yucca. Over there, it looks like a forest, and that's because it more or less is. In fact, the phenomenon we're looking at over there is what's oftentimes referred to as a sky island. If you think back to any island at all, it's an ecosystem that is isolated. And because that ecosystem is isolated, everything on that island has to adapt and change to the isolation. Well, trail. This is a forest, another ecosystem that's isolated, this time in a vast desert. And because it's isolated, everything on these mountainsides has to adapt to the isolation. For example, there's an animal that I really love talking about called the rock squirrel. So the rock squirrel is a perfect example of island adaptation on our mountainside here because he's too big for the rest of the Mojave at about 1.5 feet from nose tip to tail tip, almost 2 feet sometimes. This is a massive squirrel, and he can't leave to the valley floor below. The rest of his population's on the other side of the Colorado River, so out here they had to adapt by becoming incredibly aggressive and territorial. They had to protect their food sources out here, which means, for us anyways, that when a wild rattlesnake wanders into the wrong neighborhood, rock squirrels will kill and eat them. This is a small example of what it takes to survive on an island here, and I bring it up because there's a second island over there, the caverns themselves. There's a whole ecosystem in there. We're going to talk all about that ecosystem once we get inside. I just mostly bring it up now because you might not see everything that ecosystem has to offer. And if that's the case, not only do I apologize, but State Parks makes it up to you by putting this board right here. This board is all about the ecosystem inside the caverns. So feel free to check that out as you make your way down. Please read carefully if you decide to do that. And of course, well, are there any questions before we move on? Yeah, it's in my eye. Okay, it's gone. And what's this?
Wow. That's great. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think so far?
I think it's really nice.
Yeah.
But the bottom here almost looks like an oasis. Reminds me of one that you find when you hike the waterfall in Unseparated.
So right now we're going up to the caverns. We're gonna go up there, and then I'll pretty much start my scene where I left off for there. Okay. All right, guys. See you in a bit.
So, what does that look like to you guys up there? What does that look like?
Soot.
Soot, yes. Whoever said that, gold stars, because it is soot from campfire smokes. And of course, the stuff up there is ancient. In fact, it's hundreds of years old, and in particular, it comes from a tribe of Native Americans called the Chemehuevis. Come on in. Let's get inside. Let's, don't be shy. Come on down. Gotta make sure everyone gets in. That's everyone. So, folks, real quick, before we even get started, I want to draw your attention towards that. See that pale light up there that looks different than all the other lights in here? That's the only amount of natural light in this cavern. And that's also Jack's original entrance. All these rocks and boulders between us and that, this is the route Jack had to climb down. All those ropes and rope ladders, and keep in mind the floor is down there. We have a ways to go. We're going to take these steps down in just a minute, but before we take those steps down, I kind of wanted to introduce some of the residents that you may or may not see on today's tour, and hopefully we do get to see them. But let's start with the most popular, bats. You see, this cavern is usually home to the Townsend big-eared bats. And for those of you whose heads just shot up just now, you're quickly seeing that unlike in the movies, there's not hundreds of bats all over the ceilings of the cave. In fact, most bats don't really do that. For example, the Townsend big-eared bats, when they do roost a lot, in big numbers, it actually tends to be specifically a maternity roost. You see, right after mating season, female Townsend big-eared bats will all roost with each other as a survival mechanism to help rear each other's young and keep each other safe. However, we don't even get that. We only really get a few solitary male bats who are very territorial and will find corners of the cave where the tour tends not to bother them, and they'll rest for the day. However, that's what I want to talk about. They're resting. which means if we do see bats on today's tour, it is going to be important to not flash them with camera flashes or flashlights. We want to leave them resting. We don't want to disturb them any more than we may already be doing. And that out of the way, I should also mention that since we only get male bats in here, you are more than welcome to call this place the Bachelor Pad. I know, I'm so sorry. Getting back on track here, though, another resident we should talk a lot more about is something called wood rats. They're also known as pack rats, and when it comes to pack rats, just like the bats, they found corners of the cave where the tour tends not to bother them, and they're resting. However, bats hibernate in the winter. Rats do not. And that means they're the most active species in here. Every night, pack rats scurry all throughout here in a mad dash to go outside and do pack rat things, and it's because of that that you will find that the floor in here is incredibly disgusting. After all, pack rats are very romantic animals. They urine for each other. I know. But in all seriousness, yeah, I would not touch this floor if I were you. It's covered in pack rat urine, pack rat droppings, and of course it's perfectly natural. In fact, it's a big part of our ecosystem in here because what the pack rats leave behind, not just number one, but namely number two, is very important for our cavern, especially this one. And that's because our cavern is actually home to two species of something called troglobites. Now, troglobite is just a fancy Greek word for an animal that lives only and solely in a cavern. Essentially, this is their entire universe. They can't leave to the outside world. This is all they'll ever know. And to survive in here, they had to get very crafty with how they adapted. So let's first talk about the pseudoscorpion. That's our first troglobite I'm going to talk about because he's the easiest one to talk about. The pseudoscorpion is an arachnid native to our cavern that's about 6 feet long and swims through the dirt like a shark. All right, for those of you giggling, I know that you're paying attention. The pseudoscorpion is an arachnid native to our cavern that's about 1/10 of an inch, a fraction of an inch, and it gets its name because it looks like half a scorpion. And by that I mean it looks like somebody took a pair of scissors to a scorpion. On one side, claws, scorpion face, scorpion legs, scorpion claws, and the other side, nothing. Stalagmites, like this one over here. Stalagmites might grow up and reach the stalactites. And when they do reach, that's when you get the really good stuff, like this over here. What do you suppose we call them when they reach? What do you suppose we call them when they reach?
Column.
We call them columns. Yeah, that's our column. That's our column up there. You see the stalagmite at the top, stalagmite underneath, the right in the middle, where the two of them meet. Right underneath that is this thing called a belt canopy. Now, belt canopies, they get their names because they're shaped like a bell and they're broad like a canopy. And this is where I'm going to let you guys know right now that cave formations probably don't get the most creative names out there. For example, underneath this belt canopy here are these tufts that kind of look like coral in the rocks, right? This is cave coral. Underneath some of these tufts of coral are what looks like the pipes to an organ. These are coral pipes. Again, these are not the most creative names out there. But if the theory is to be believed, this is a great example of how much water was coming through here millions of years ago. In fact, this is a great example of erosion as well. Because essentially, this was once the ground level. This was the ground level where water would drip in from above, splashing here, and as it splashed, it created mud, and as it splashed some more, most of those minerals dispersed into the mud, into the tufts of the corals that we see here. And in some cases, there was so much drippage that all of that calcium was sinking into the mud that trapped a layer of mud into a layer of calcium and formed these pipes, which are full of an ancient clay from the ancient mud. And then, of course, a few million years after that, we get another example of erosion and how much water this cave was getting millions of years ago. Namely because of this refreshing pool of water right over here next to me. Now, admittedly, there has not been water in this pool for a few million years, but you can actually still see where the water would stream in from and pour down this way and would pool up right here and would start to form this right on top. This right on top, this is a shelf stone. The idea being that when you get formations that start to reach into a body of water, they're bringing down all those minerals, and a handful of those minerals scatter across the surface, and they form a shelf that sits right on top. This is a shelf stone here, and in fact, I've got a better example of this later on. I just mostly bring it up now because comparatively, this is a massive shelf stone. This is huge. In fact, real quick, everything you guys are taking photos of right now, the stalactites, stalagmites, columns, bells, corals, tubes, and shells, all of this is the result of water coming in from above, breaking apart the rocks, and bringing it down. Erosion. So given enough erosion, what do you suppose is going to happen to the ceiling above? Collapse. Yeah, exactly. Take a look at Jack's entrance over there. All those rocks and boulders he had to climb down from, where does it look like they came from? From the ceiling. Yeah, it looks like it came from up. And of course, we got to be careful in here because I have failed to mention that each and every rock up there is poisonous. Yeah. And one drop will kill you. I know, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to lighten up the mood. 'Cause, of course, the moment you start talking about collapse, people tend to get a little nervous. So allow me to try and put your mind at ease here. This, right, all of this is an example of how much water was coming through here millions of years ago, right? So that's an example of how much water this cave is getting right now. That is a world of difference. In fact, that's a world of difference because it is a very different world out there right now. It's now a desert. It's no longer a very rich forest. And so, everything up there is starting to do something kind of remarkable. But to tell that story, let me share a fun fact with you guys. Concrete. The reason it's the building material of the modern age is because of its main ingredient, limestone. Limestone, when you break it apart with a water solution and allow it to dry back up, it seals itself up and becomes perfect for building. Well, all of that is limestone, which was being broken up by a water solution, but now that the water is no longer coming through here and everything's dry out there, it's drying up, it's sealing itself up, and it's becoming very structurally sound in here. So much so that, at least according to the reports I've read, if you were in here during an earthquake, you might not even feel it. That's just how structurally sound we are in here. So, with that out of the way, are there any questions before we move on? All right, real quick, we're going to start moving into the Queen's Chamber, and I need you guys to understand, we have a full-size group today. So that means that, you guys are going to lose elbows. Right there.
Cave shield. Here I go into the deep abyss. Thank you. Josh has helped me out with the light. And now I'm going down the stairs. This is beautiful, guys.
Four apostles here. Original tunnel. Up above.
Okay. Coral fossils and original tunnel up above.
It's the original tunnel.
Wow. Now I'm gonna try to piece up so I don't lose the tour guide in front of me.
Yes. Do you have a record about from earthquakes that might have helped shape?
Not about earthquakes that might have helped shape this. Most records I have are like earthquakes during the time when the parks are here. And honestly, earthquakes really don't do much here. Like I said, it's very structurally sound. And they really did have a surprise waiting for them. When they got down there, they found hundreds, not just a bunch of flares, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of flares. There were so many flares down there. State Parks had to dig them out so we could actually see the bottom. And upon digging out all those road flares, that's when we realized what had been going on for all these years. Jack had been doctoring the road flares.
Now we're going up. Up.
Feel free to take your pictures and be sure to show the people behind you the cave mushrooms so they can take their photos too. Yes.
Cave mushroom. Oh, it's so cute. Cave mushroom.
Cave mushrooms.
Oh. Cave mushrooms.
Wow. Cave mushrooms there.
The mushroom.
Yes, there is. Yes. So as more people come in, just keep in mind that we are going to have to make room just like in the Queen's Chamber. Of course, here, feel free to take your photos. That's just as more people come in. Okay, so for those of you who are just coming in, just like in the Queen's Chamber, be sure to make room for everyone. Perfect, perfect. You guys are pretty much you're good. You're good. Yeah.
We're like.
Yes. You guys are fine. See, I think that's everyone. In fact, I believe you were the gentleman helping me in the back, weren't you? I was. Of course. You're going to help me out, okay? This is what's going to happen. I want to see how well everyone does. Did you get a chance to see those cave mushrooms back there?
I did.
Wonderful, wonderful. In fact, all of your checks will be in the mail. Yeah. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about the cave mushrooms, because most people don't even realize this. You're not yet in the second cave when you see those cave mushrooms. That's all man-made tunnel back there, with the exception of those cave mushrooms. That's a miniature cavern that was punched through by state parks when they drilled all this out. And in fact, well, at one point, that little pocket must have been filled with water. For those of you who got a chance to take photos of the cave mushrooms, you'll, when you go back and look at them, notice that they're, well, leveled with each other. All those little round mushroom caps, they're all on the exact same level, and that is because that was the body of water. And as more minerals dripped in from the bottom, creating tiny little stalactites that reached into that body of water, minerals scattered across the surface and formed tiny little shell stones, like the big one in El Paquiva here. Which, well, speaking of the big one, welcome to the fallen stalactite room. The fallen stalactite gets its name from this gigantic fallen stalactite right here next to me. This thing fell from the roof of this cavern so many millions of years ago that as water drips in from above and runs down its sides, two things are now happening. First, take a look at these smaller stalactites at his base. They came down with him, they should be slanted like he is, but instead, water and gravity have been correcting their pathway downwards. Second, those of you in the back might have a hard time seeing this part, but for those of you up front, take a look right here. These two steps are carved out of a cave, and right here you can see where he's fused to his surroundings. The water has been fusing him to everything around him. Over there in the back, you can probably see where he's fused to those drapery formations right over here. Real quick, side note, much better example of draperies. You can actually see the crack in the rocks up here where the water was coming from and run down this solid rock wall, creating these stalactites that are embedded into the rock wall here. Draperies. That being said, let's get back on track. The fallen stalactite here, according to estimations, weighs roughly 8.5 tons, which, if you don't know, that's heavier than an African elephant. However, there is a different elephant in this room, and I'm sure some of you felt this as soon as you walked in. It's about 63 degrees in here with 43% humidity. So let's talk about that. Because, well, we're in Tecopa. Tecopa's south facing. You guys remember the canyon outside? One side was forested and north facing, one side was south and Mojave facing. We have left the forest. We're back in Mojave. This cavern right now is getting beaten down by the sun. So much so that in these back rooms that don't get a lot of airflow, these back rooms heat up like an oven. Except for right now, where admittedly we're in a cold year. This cavern usually reaches about 70 degrees in here. On top of that, 43% humidity is relatively low. The lowest I've ever seen it is 30% humidity, and the highest I've ever seen it is 60%, and that's usually because of snow. This year was no different. We got. Oh
my god, sorry.
You guys feel free to make a wish, but don't tell anybody, it won't come true.
This is the wishing stone. This is the wishing stone that they were talking about. This is a pretty big, narrow entrance. Careful. There's the narrow. This is cool, guys.
Crystal. Picture. What? And then
Look at that. Wow. These motherfuckers. My God, they look scary. They're like right in front of my head. Here, go get another minute. I'm about to go in, guys. About to go. There's this too.
You know what? I wish they seem to always evade us.
Wow.
All right, let's see. I think that's everybody's. Is everyone else back there? Nope. Nope. Yeah, there's two more. There's two more.
Now we're here.
Alright guys, that's gonna do it for the video. If you guys love that tour of the Mitchell Caverns, feel free to come out and check it out. It's actually like 3 hours from Riverside. I believe the city's name is what, Josh?
Essex.
Essex. Okay, so go ahead and give it a shot. It was actually roughly around like a 2 hour, 3 hour tour. I'd say it was pretty fun and exhilarating. We saw some pretty cool stuff inside the cavern, as you guys saw. No bats so far. It was a lot of steep trails, but it was overall really fun experience. I recommend everyone to come here and try it. It was so cool. And also, don't forget to give me a subscribe down below. Hit that post notification bell so you'll be alerted every time I make a post. And please give me a comment if you guys want to see any other videos like this. And go ahead and give this video a like. With that being said, thank you so much for watching and have a good day.